They say birthdays are for celebration, but for me, Maya, turning 27 felt more like crossing another mile marker on a road I didn't ask to walk. I wasn't in the mood for balloons, for fake cheer, or forced laughter. 2 months without a job will do that to you. I had been applying, chasing interviews, pretending I had it together, but everything in me just felt tired, raw, unseen. Still, when my cousin Eli texted me that Friday morning dinner at Bellerose tonight, everyone's going. For you, just come, I paused. Eli wasn't like the rest of them. He didn't parrot the family's passive-aggressive gospel, didn't see me as some drifting storm cloud. He just saw me. So I went. Bellerose was one of those faux, cosy Italian places, over-decorated with fake vines, flickering candlelight, and Sinatra crooning from invisible speakers. I wore black jeans and a soft navy blouse that didn't scream for attention, just whispered, "I tried." I walked in and instantly felt it. That heavy, expectant silence that masks itself as warmth. My mother, Joan, looked up from her seat near the end of the long table, her mouth curling into a tight-lipped smile. "There's my girl," she said, like an obligation. Hayley, my older sister, barely glanced up from her phone. No hug, no happy birthday. Just a flick of her hair and a half smirk when I took the open seat beside Eli. "Happy birthday," he said gently, eyes already apologizing for something I hadn't yet seen. Dinner began with half-hearted toasts and the usual pleasantries wrapped in subtle insults. "You finally found a shirt that fits," my mother commented, tone syrupy but sharp. "So, any interviews?" she asked midway through her lasagna. I nodded vaguely, knowing the script already. "Maybe you're being too picky," she mused. Hayley snorted into her wine. Then came Aunt Rachel loud, commanding, practically allergic to empathy. "You know, when I was your age," she began, voice rising like a sermon, "I worked 3 jobs and didn't have time to sulk about soul-crushing work." Eli pressed his foot against mine beneath the table. "Stay grounded, stay calm." Then the cake came, big, white frosting, blue piping, single candle. And across the top, in bright pink cursive, "Oops." Still a disappointment. It landed like a slap I should have seen coming, but somehow didn't. They laughed. Hayley choked on her drink, wheezing, "It's just a joke, Maya. Don't be so sensitive." Rachel slapped the table, roaring, "Best cake I've ever seen." I stared. At the cake. At them. At my mother, who offered a shrug and said, "It's meant to be light-hearted, honey." It wasn't. I stood, picked up my bag, felt Eli shift beside me. "Maya," he whispered. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. I just leaned slightly toward Aunt Rachel and whispered 6 quiet words into her ear. The colour drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. I left. No goodbye, no drama. Just the echo of their laughter folding in on itself, and that cake mocking, melting, meaningless. I didn't answer my phone that weekend. Not once. I left it face down on the kitchen counter while I made soup, rearranged my bookshelf, and let the silence stretch like warm wool around my shoulders. It was the first time in years that my family wasn't pressing in on me with their voices, their expectations, their judgment. They didn't know what I'd said to Rachel. Not exactly. But they knew it mattered, because secrets have weight and hers had just been dropped like a stone into still water. 6 months earlier, I had been helping my dad, Raymond, clean out the garage. Mum said she needed the space. What she really meant was she needed someone else to do the lifting while she barked out instructions from the patio. Among the sagging boxes of Halloween decorations and old receipts, I found a folder tucked behind a broken folding chair. Yellowed edges, soft spine, dust coating the cover. Grandpa's name written in faded black marker. I didn't plan to open it, I really didn't. But the thing about truth is it pulls at you. Inside were old bank statements, scribbled notes in Grandpa's familiar shaky hand, and a copy of his will. Or at least, the original version I remembered from years ago. It had been split evenly, Joan, Rachel, and Uncle Marcus, Grandpa's 3 children. That was always the narrative. Except now there was an amendment, a legally signed, notarized addendum stating that Rachel would receive nothing if she failed to repay a large loan she had taken from the family business. According to Grandpa's letter dated a year before he passed, she never did. The amendment was clean, binding, and damning. And yet, when Grandpa died, Rachel still got her third. She bought a summer condo within weeks of the estate closing. I remember the photos she shared, wine glasses by the lake, a caption that said earned, not given. I took photos of every page, quietly, carefully. I didn't tell anyone, not even Eli, because at the time, I didn't think it was my fight. I wasn't named in the will. I had nothing to gain. I told myself that if Marcus or someone else ever looked into it, I'd speak up then. But then came that cake, those smug grins, that birthday turned punchline. And suddenly it wasn't about inheritance or legal loopholes anymore. It was about power, about how they needed someone like me, quiet, stumbling, still a disappointment to keep their messes buried. They needed me small, but I wasn't small anymore. So I told Rachel 6 words I know about the basement file, and I walked out before the rot could reach me. It took 2 weeks for the storm to arrive. At first, it was quiet, eerily so, the same kind of quiet you hear before a thunderclap. My phone stayed mercifully silent. No group chats, no calls from Joan, no sarcastic texts from Haley. Nothing but the occasional "Are you okay?" from Eli. I always replied with the same thing, "I'm good. I meant it more than I didn't." But then, like someone flipped a switch, the buzzing began. Notifications, emails, missed calls from numbers I recognized and ones I didn't, messages from my mother, from Haley, even from my dad Raymond, who usually stayed miles away from the crossfire. There were voicemails, all riddled with panic. "Maya, please call me back. This has gone too far. You misunderstood. You have to talk to Rachel. This is tearing the family apart." Oh, now they were worried about tearing the family apart. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to play referee in a game I never agreed to join. But I was curious enough to pick up when my mum called late on a Tuesday, voice trembling, half choked on some combination of fear and disbelief. "Maya," she said, "why would you say that to Rachel? What were you trying to do?" I leaned against the window in my apartment, looking out over the glow of porch lights and empty sidewalks. "I didn't say anything untrue. You don't understand what that money meant to her." That's when I knew. She knew. Maybe not the full truth. Maybe Rachel had fed her some half-baked version about Grandpa changing his mind or being confused during his final year. But Joan wasn't shocked. She wasn't outraged. She was tired, resigned. Like this had been festering under her skin for a long time, and now the wound had opened in public. "I found the amendment, Mum," I said flatly. "In the garage. It was notarized, signed, time-stamped." Rachel was cut out, but she still got paid. "You want to explain that to me?" Dead silence. Then she told me it wouldn't hold up in court, so she ignored it. "And you helped." That's when she hung up. I expected more silence after that, but instead I got Marcus. Uncle Marcus never called me, not for birthdays, holidays, even when I graduated college. He was one of those sends a card and considers it emotional labor types. So when my phone lit up at 10:47 p.m. with his name, I nearly dropped it. I let it go to voicemail. Hey Maya, it's Marcus. I heard from Eli that you said something to Rachel about Grandpa's will. Is it true? Can you please call me back? I think something's really wrong here. I waited a full day. Then I called and I told him everything about the folder, the amendment, the bank statements, the wire transfers. I even emailed him every photo I had high-res scans with Grandpa's signature visible beneath the date. Marcus went silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, shaken but sharper. I knew it, he said. I knew something didn't add up. When the estate settled, Rachel bought that lake condo like it was pocket change. I asked Joan about it, and she told me it was part of a private gift Grandpa gave Rachel before he passed. But that didn't sit right. Grandpa never gave private gifts. Everything went through the family books. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. You know what I'm going to do, he said. I nodded, even though he couldn't see. You're going to call a lawyer. He did. That's when everything cracked open. The group chat I had muted long ago suddenly lit up with 126 unread messages. Haley had apparently gone nuclear. Posts, voice notes, paragraphs of spin. We've always tried to support Maya. This is a complete misunderstanding. She's confused. She's angry about the cake and taking it out on us. Joan chimed in with her greatest hits. This isn't about money, it's about Grandpa's legacy. I couldn't help but laugh. They had been shredding that legacy the moment Rachel cashed a check that wasn't hers. But the best part? People were no longer buying the story. Sophie Marcus's daughter, who'd always been quiet, observant, posted screenshots I had sent her father, the amendment, the notes, Grandpa's letter. If you're more upset at Maya for exposing this than at Rachel for committing fraud, you're part of the problem, she wrote. Noah backed her up. So did Eli. One by one, the people I thought would stay silent began to take a side. And for once, my side wasn't the empty corner. But the real death knell came from Marcus. One message, plain, cold. My lawyer will be in touch with anyone involved in Grandpa's estate process. Please preserve all documentation. After that, the chat went dead. No memes, no birthday announcements, no casual anyone got good chili recipes energy, just silence. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't who I expected. Not Joan, not Haley. It was Raymond, my dad. He stood there in a heavy coat, hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders curled inward like someone walking into a wind they weren't prepared for. Can we talk? He asked. We walked a few blocks in silence, just me and him and the crunch of gravel underfoot. I didn't know, he said after a while, about the amendment, about Grandpa cutting Rachel out. Your mum told me it was a clean three-way split. Why did you believe her? I wanted to. There was nothing dramatic in his voice. No defense. Just the quiet ache of someone realizing they'd looked the other way for too long. I'm sorry, he said, not just for the cake, for everything. For letting them treat you like you didn't matter. I didn't cry, but something inside me unclenched. Just a little. What do you want me to do? He asked. It was the first time anyone in that family had asked me that. I don't know yet, I said honestly. The fallout was only beginning. Marcus's lawyer contacted the attorney who had handled Grandpa's estate. The guy had since retired, but still had records. Guess what was missing? That's right, the amendment, gone, never submitted during probate, which meant someone removed it. And there were only two people who had access to that paperwork at the time, Rachel and Joan. And I had the proof they didn't expect. Justice doesn't yell. It doesn't storm into the room and throw dishes or scream at a birthday dinner. It arrives quietly clutching folders, dates, signatures. It speaks in receipts, not revenge. And I had them all. While the family scrambled to rewrite their version of events, Marcus's lawyer was threading together the real one. He reached out to Grandpa's former probate attorney, a man named Harold Langley, who had long since retired to Arizona, but still answered emails, especially when the subject line read, "Will Amendment Inquiry, Legal Urgency." Harold confirmed two things. Yes, he had received an amendment from Grandpa, cutting Rachel out of the will if she didn't repay the loan. No, that amendment was never submitted during probate. He even remembered calling Joan to confirm receipt of the original will and asking whether there were any last-minute changes. She had allegedly told him, "No updates, just the original we all expected." And just like that, the case wasn't just about a moral failing, it was legal fraud. Marcus's legal team moved fast. They pulled up the estate timeline, the list of individuals who had access to the documents, and even financial trails from Grandpa's business account. Rachel had received her inheritance within 5 business days of the estate closing, a wire transfer, marked distribution of estate funds. But the real dagger came buried in the follow-up. The paper trail led straight to my mother. Bank statements showed that 2 weeks after the estate closed, Rachel transferred $30 to a joint account belonging to herself and Joan. The description? Private reimbursement. A thank you gift, it seemed. I had always wondered why Mum looked so strangely proud when Rachel bought that lake condo, not just supportive, almost invested. Now I knew why. They hadn't just stolen Grandpa's legacy, they'd split it like a poker pot behind closed doors. Once the legal notices began arriving, the panic started bleeding through. Haley called again, this time with none of her usual venom. "Maya, this is out of control," she said between shaky breaths. "You're going to ruin everything. Mum hasn't slept in days." Rachel's freaking out. "You have to fix this." I almost laughed. "Fix it? You guys humiliated me. You laughed. You bought a cake that mocked me to my face. And now that people are asking questions, I'm the one who's gone too far. That was a joke." "No," I said. "It was a mirror." She hung up. That night, the family group chat lit up again. I didn't respond, but Eli sent me screenshots. Joan was now claiming that Grandpa had grown confused in his final year, that he didn't understand the amendment he signed, that Rachel had only borrowed the money as part of a long-standing family agreement, and that no one had intended to deceive anyone. Classic misdirection. But it didn't hold. Because the amendment wasn't just a note, it was notarized, it was timestamped, it had witnesses, and Grandpa's signature was as clear as ever, steady and unshaken, exactly a year before he passed. Marcus's lawyer filed the paperwork to reopen probate on the basis of omitted legal documentation. And once the petition was accepted, Rachel's entire inheritance plus interest was suddenly under review. The court began tracing assets. Guess whose name popped up again? Joan, my mother. The lake condo Rachel bought had her listed as co-owner, another string pulled, another mask falling off. The calls from numbers I didn't recognize tripled. Some were lawyers, some were family friends who'd clearly taken a side and were now second-guessing their alliances. Others were distant relatives who had never once messaged me and were now so sorry for how I had been treated. One voicemail stood out. "Maya, it's Aunt Carol. I saw the post Marcus shared. I just want you to know I believe you, and I think your grandpa would be proud of you for standing up for what's right. It stunned me more than anything else, because until that moment, I hadn't realized I'd stopped being afraid of them. 3 days later, my doorbell rang again. This time it was my mother. She looked smaller, no makeup. Her coat thrown on without thought, hair unbrushed. I opened the door, but didn't step back to let her in. "I didn't know he signed an amendment," she said softly. I stared at her. "You told Harold there were no updates to the will." I panicked. "You helped Rachel steal from your brother." Her eyes were glassy. She told me Grandpa was confused, that it wouldn't hold up, that he was trying to punish her for something petty. And you believed her. I wanted to. There it was again, the same phrase Dad had used. Wanting to believe a lie because the truth was inconvenient. I stayed silent, arms folded, the cold air cutting between us. "I thought the birthday dinner would be good for you," she added. "Good for me?" I echoed. "A reminder," she said, her voice shaking, "of what you have, what I had, a family that reduced me to a punchline, a cake that literally called me a disappointment." I stepped forward, not with anger but finality. "No. What I have now is clarity. I didn't invite her in. I didn't hug her. I just said, 'Tell your lawyer to call Marcus's.'" Then I closed the door. In the weeks that followed, the legal gears turned fast. Marcus's legal team obtained statements from Harold, who provided documentation confirming the amendment's original delivery. My photographs lined up with his archive perfectly. Emails surfaced ones between Rachel and Joan discussing the will, casually referencing how we'll just say it was split evenly. That email was dated 2 weeks after Grandpa passed and 2 weeks before the funds were distributed. Textbook fraud and poetic justice. Rachel's lawyer reached out to settle. Marcus refused. He wanted a full court judgment, and he got it. The ruling? Rachel was ordered to repay her entire third of the inheritance, with interest a total of nearly $230. Joan, my mother, was fined $15,000 for her role in omitting legal documentation and formally named in court records as a co-conspirator. The lake condo was placed under lien, and within 2 months it was listed for sale. The group chat went quiet again, this time for good. Some relatives posted vague Instagram quotes about betrayal and snakes. Haley posted one that said, "Family isn't blood, it's who stands beside you when the storm comes." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The storm came, and they finally had to feel it, not just watch others get soaked. The funny thing about silence, real silence, is that once you sit in it long enough, you start hearing the things that matter. It wasn't the silence I used to dread as a kid. The one that came after dinner when Joan would stare at her wine and Rachel would passive-aggressively suggest I try a trade school, while Dad fixed the leaking faucet like it was the only thing he could control. This silence was different. It wasn't hollow, it wasn't punishment, it was peace. And for the first time in my life, I had earned it. 8 months. That's how long everything took. From the cake to the courtroom. From a joke made in pink icing to a gavel cracking down on the truth. Rachel lost. Spectacularly. The judgment was public. Formal. Undeniable. The court ruled that she had committed deliberate probate fraud by omitting a legal amendment and misrepresenting Grandpa's final wishes. She was forced to repay $229,000, her full third, plus interest to Marcus. The lake condo? Sold. Joan, my mother, was formally cited in the ruling for assisting in document suppression. She paid a $15,000 fine. More than the money, she had to do something far more uncomfortable. She had to issue a formal admission in writing, acknowledging her role in the concealment. It was a single paragraph. Legal. Emotionless. No apology. But it carried weight. She never spoke to me again after that. Haley tried to spin her way out of it. First, radio silence. Then cryptic posts on Instagram. Sometimes loyalty costs too much. Some people don't know when to stop. Then, finally, a DM she sent Eli. Maya's always been jealous. She wanted to ruin Rachel from the start. Eli didn't even respond, and honestly, neither did I, because she got it wrong. I never wanted to ruin Rachel. I just wanted them to see what they'd buried. Marcus sent me flowers. Lilies and eucalyptus, wrapped in simple brown paper with a card. Thank you for protecting Dad's memory. I should have spoken up years ago. I'm sorry it had to be you. It didn't feel like victory, not exactly, but it felt like something, like recognition. I moved shortly after the ruling. A quieter part of town, one with actual trees, not just window boxes and car alarms. My new apartment faces a small garden where older women walk their dogs and talk like old friends. Sometimes I open the window just to hear their laughter. I got a job too, remote, mid-level content strategist for a mid-sized tech firm, decent pay, real benefits. A manager who actually asks how I'm doing and seems to care about the answer. Nobody there knows about the cake, or the will, or how I used to be the family footnote. I'm just Maya. And that's more than enough. Eli and I still talk almost every day. We meet for coffee once a week, same cafe, same corner table. He brings news from the extended family like headlines I didn't ask for. Rachel's trying to move to Florida. Mum's pretending nothing happened. Haley's dating a guy who sells supplements on TikTok. Sometimes I laugh, sometimes I shrug. Mostly, I sip my coffee and let it pass through me. Because they don't live here anymore, not in my head, not in my heart. I evicted them. Dad reached out again last month. Just a short message, I'm still here if you'll have me. We met at a bookstore cafe on a rainy Wednesday. He brought a notebook instead of flowers. Inside, handwritten letters, one for each birthday he missed. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't defend anyone. He just said, I wish I'd stood up for you sooner. And I don't expect anything now. But I'm here if you want that. I didn't cry. But I did fold the notebook closed and say, maybe you can come by next week for dinner. He smiled like someone given a second chance he didn't deserve. And that was exactly why I offered it. This year, on my birthday, Eli showed up with a cake. Chocolate, rich frosting, one candle, pink icing across the top that said, oops, turns out you were right. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped it. We cut 2 slices, turned on a dumb sitcom, and watched the sun go down behind the apartment buildings. No drama, no fake toasts, just the hum of the fridge and the quiet clink of forks. People still ask, was it worth it? Was it worth tearing apart what was left of my family over a folder in a garage and a line of icing on a birthday cake? And to them, I say this, it wasn't about tearing anything apart. It was about not holding it together when it was already broken. They made me the disappointment. And I let them. 4 years. But that night, I chose something else. Not revenge. Not chaos. Just truth. And in that truth, I found myself. Story 2. So, my name's Jordan. I'm 29. And if my family had a dictionary, the entry under reliable fallback would probably just be a picture of me. Not because I've ever crashed a car into the garage or caused a scene at Thanksgiving, but because I was always the one who cleaned it all up. I've always kept my head down, paid my rent on time, built a decent career, and learned to say no in a way that still sounded polite. My therapist calls it being boundary aware. My parents call it being difficult. And if I'm the default fixer, my older sister, she's the default excuse. Her name's Brooke. She's 33 going on 17. Never held a job longer than a semester, always between opportunities, and has the uncanny ability to turn any failure into a tragedy that somehow isn't her fault. Boss fires her. They were sexist. Roommate kicks her out, toxic vibes, rent overdue. Well, the economy's bad, Jordan. Obviously. My parents? Eternal enablers. They'll drop everything for Brooke. Me? I once had to Uber to the ER with a broken wrist because they were helping Brooke figure out her Wi-Fi password. I made my peace with it eventually. Learned to disengage, keep my distance. I'd built a solid life and a quiet apartment in a nice neighborhood. It was mine. It was safe. Until that dinner. I should have known something was up the moment I walked through their front door. My mum was practically beaming like she'd won the lottery. Dad was suspiciously silent, like he'd been coached not to say the wrong thing. And Brooke? She wouldn't even look at me. We did the whole routine. Small talk, mild jabs at how I'm too busy to visit more, and the usual passive-aggressive digs. I was halfway through my plate of roast chicken when Mum dropped it. "So, sweetie," she started, in that sugary voice she saves for when she's about to ask something outrageous. "Brooke's going to stay with you for a bit." I blinked. Fork mid-air. Thought maybe I'd misheard. Nope. She doubled down immediately. She just needs a stable place to reset. It'll be temporary. You have such a lovely space all to yourself. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Dad chimed in, looking like a man who wanted to be anywhere else. "It's not like you can't afford it. She just needs a few months to regroup." Brooke finally looked up. "I won't be in the way." "I can help out." "Help out." "Sure." Brooke helping out is like a raccoon promising to guard your leftovers. I've seen her version of help. It ends with moldy dishes and mysterious charges on my DoorDash account. But I just nodded, calm, measured. "Okay," I said. "You'd think I had just donated a kidney." My mum gushed about how proud she was. Dad nodded like he had narrowly avoided a domestic civil war. "And Brooke?" She smiled, like she'd won a bet she hadn't even needed to place. They had no idea. I played along. Asked what day she'd be moving in. Saturday? Perfect. I even offered to help carry boxes. What I didn't mention, I had moved out of that apartment 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I sold the place. New tenant, new locks, new life. And on Saturday, I was going to sit back and let the curtain rise. The lead up to the big day was better than Christmas. I kept things normal, answered texts, sent a few heart emojis, even offered to pick up snacks for move-in day. But Saturday, I was gone. Out running errands, phone off, coffee in hand. Ready for the chaos. Around noon, my phone started vibrating. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, another call. This time I picked up. "Jordan," my mum's voice crackled through, high-pitched and panicked. "What's going on?" "Hey," I said, playing dumb. "Everything okay?" "We're at your apartment," she snapped. "Except it's not your apartment anymore. The landlord says it was sold. There's someone else living here." I let out a soft "oh no" like I just found out my favourite cereal was discontinued. "Really?" I said. "Weird. I thought I mentioned that." "You didn't," Dad barked in from the background. "You told us Brooke could move in." "Right," I said. "But I didn't say where." Silence, then chaos. I could hear Brooke in the background now, yelling, probably trying to figure out which poor soul was now occupying her fantasy crash pad. My parents? Flustered, angry, scrambling. "I mean, you never asked if I still lived there," I added calmly. "So, I didn't lie. You manipulated us," Dad hissed. "What are we supposed to do now? We've got her things here." "I don't know," I said, sipping my latte. "Maybe she could stay with one of those toxic roommates." Click. I hung up. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but of course not. A few hours later, I heard a knock at my door. I live in a totally different place, now new building, new security, new everything. They must have called every friend of mine or gone through my Instagram to figure it out. I peeked through the peephole. There they were, all three of them. Brooke, looking like she'd just lost a court case. Mum, clutching a box like it might explode. Dad, arms crossed, already bracing for another rejection. I opened the door. Jordan, Mum said, not even trying to smile. We need to talk. Hi, I said pleasantly. How did you find me? That doesn't matter, Dad snapped. You need to make this right. Do I? Brooke pushed forward. You promised. No, I said, leaning against the doorframe. I agreed to let you move into a place. Didn't say it was this one. You lied, she barked. No, I smiled. I'm misled. Big difference. Brooke lunged like she was about to shove past me, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled out my phone. You touched that door, I warned, and I'm calling the cops. You wouldn't, Mum started. I already did, I said. Earlier, just in case. I swear you could feel the air change. A few minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Officer Ramirez. She'd been here once before noise complaint from a neighbour's party. Nice woman. No nonsense. Evening, she said as she stepped up. We got a call about a trespassing issue. I nodded. Yes, officer. My family here seems to think this apartment belongs to them. It does not. I've asked them to leave. Brooke tried the sympathy angle. He told me I could live with him. But he doesn't want you here now, the officer said flatly. And that means you need to go. My dad tried reasoning. We just thought, I get it, Ramirez cut in. But misunderstandings don't give you the right to show up with moving boxes and demand entry. Brooke looked like she was going to scream. Instead, she muttered something about karma and stormed back toward the car. The officer turned to me. Want to press charges? I shook my head. Not unless they come back. She nodded, then turned to them. You heard him. Leave now. If you show up again, it becomes criminal trespass. They left. Not with an apology. Not with grace. Just a trunk full of boxes and a car full of regret. And me? I walked back inside, shut the door, and locked it. Peacefully, quietly, like I'd finally hit mute on the chaos that used to define my life. The knock at my door didn't come the next day, or the day after. I figured my family would need a little time to lick their wounds, reframe the narrative, maybe even come up with a brand new version of events where none of it was their fault. But they stayed quiet. I won't lie, it threw me off. These were people who once called me 5 times in one night because Brooke lost her phone charger and couldn't figure out what to do. Silence wasn't their style. I spent that week doing something I hadn't done in years, relaxing. Really relaxing, like sitting on the couch in my sweatpants, watching documentaries I never finished, lighting candles, just because. My phone stayed on Do Not Disturb longer than I care to admit. It felt like I was living in a house that finally stopped leaking, and I could hear myself think for the first time. Then the email started. The first one was from my mum. Short, clipped, formal in that way people get when they're furious, but trying to sound mature. Jordan, we are disappointed in how things turned out. Your actions were incredibly hurtful, not just to Brooke, but to the entire family. We need to talk. That was it. No, how are you? No, we understand why you're upset. Just a guilt grenade with a subject line. I didn't reply. 2 days later, Dad sent one. Longer, less formal. He tried to appeal to the logic side of me, like I was some emotionally detached robot who needed to be reasoned with. Look, I know things got out of hand. Maybe we should have asked more questions. But you embarrassed us, Jordan. You humiliated your sister. That's not okay. You could have just said no. He didn't get it. He never did. I had said no. For years. Quietly. Firmly. Respectfully. But saying no to my family only worked if it came with an apology, a compromise, or a backup plan that made their lives easier. And when it didn't, they steamrolled it. So yeah, I guess I figured it was time they heard the kind of no that echoed. I let that one sit in my inbox too. No reply. By Friday, Brooke had taken her grievances to social media. No names, of course. She's not dumb. But the cryptic Instagram stories were about as subtle as a hammer. Imagine thinking you could trust your own sibling and then getting stabbed in the back instead. Some people were raised, others were just left to survive. Remember that. My favourite one was a picture of her suitcase, still half packed in the back of their car, captioned, "Homeless." Again, thanks for nothing. I almost laughed. If Brooke spent half as much time working on herself as she did crafting dramatic captions, she could have bought her own place by now. Instead, she kept playing the role of the misunderstood martyr. Classic. What really surprised me, though, the people who reached out quietly. A cousin I hadn't talked to in 2 years DM'd me on Facebook, "Hey, just wanted to say I don't know the full story, but good for you. Honestly, we all knew your parents baby her too much." A high school friend messaged me, "Dude, is that about Brooke? I swear I remember her getting you grounded for something she did back in the day. Even my aunt, my dad's sister, sent a text. Heard there was drama. I always thought you were the only adult in that house. I didn't realize how many people had been watching it all play out from the sidelines, silently tallying the red flags." A week passed, then another. I started settling into my new place for real. No more half-empty boxes. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. I finally hung that set of shelves I'd been putting off, ordered a rug, bought fresh herbs for the kitchen like some kind of domestic wizard. And in the quiet moments, I started to notice something I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't anxious. There was no ticking clock in the back of my head waiting for the next obligation. No passive-aggressive voicemail. No text that said we need to talk and meant we need you to fix something we broke. I could just exist. One Thursday morning, though, I got a text from my mum that stopped me cold. "Brooke's been staying with us since the move in fell through. It's been difficult. She's struggling. We think you should reach out." I stared at that message for a long time, not because it hurt, but because of how expected it was. Even after everything, after being told to my face that my space didn't matter, after being blamed for not bailing them out, they still thought I should fix it. Not "we're sorry for not listening." Not "you were right," just another call to action, another assignment, another mess to clean. And for the first time, the urge to defend myself didn't show up. The part of me that used to justify, explain, soften the blow, that part stayed quiet. Instead, I typed out a reply that was maybe 5 years overdue. "I love you, but this isn't mine to fix." And I sent it. I stared at the 3 dots as she started typing. Then they disappeared. No follow-up. The next big shift came 2 weeks later when Brooke texted me directly. That was new. Her tone was weird, not angry, not sarcastic, almost defeated. "I know you probably hate me, I get it, but I just want to talk, please." I sat with that one longer than I care to admit. I mean, I wanted to believe she had changed, that maybe this whole mess had sparked some kind of reflection. But if I'm being honest, Brooke had always been good at sounding sorry when she needed something. So I asked her one question: "What would we be talking about?" She replied almost instantly, "Everything. What happened? Why you did it? Why I ended up where I did." It was the first time I'd seen her own anything. And that cracked the door open just enough. I told her we could meet for coffee. Public place, neutral ground. We sat outside a little cafe near my new place. She looked tired, like someone who'd finally stopped running from the mirror. "I didn't expect you to actually show," she said quietly, wrapping her hands around her coffee like it was a security blanket. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "I wasn't sure what this was." She nodded. "Honestly, I wasn't either. I figured if I didn't try to say something now, I never would." We sat in silence for a while. Not awkward, just quiet. "I thought you were supposed to be the strong one," she finally said. "The one who always had it together. I didn't realize how much we leaned on you until you stopped letting us." "That's the problem," I replied. "You didn't realize because no one ever looked down to see who was holding everything up." Brooke looked down at her cup. "I was scared, she said. That day, when the landlord said you didn't live there anymore, it hit me that I'd been banking on someone else's life to carry mine. That's what I needed you to see," I said, softer this time. Not out of spite, but because I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace to save people who wouldn't swim. She didn't argue. That was a first. We didn't hug it out. There were no tearful reconciliations or promises to start over. But we talked. Really talked. About childhood. About how she felt invisible in her own way. About how I became the easy child because no one had the energy to deal with two difficult ones. She told me she'd started looking for work. Real work. Not another startup dream or vague influencer idea. I told her I hoped she followed through. We left it there. Not enemies. Not best friends. Just two grown adults who'd finally dropped the performance long enough to talk like people. And you know what? That was enough. A few months passed. Life didn't shift overnight. No dramatic music playing in the background. No montage of healing, just slow mornings, quiet nights, and a sense of peace that settled in like morning mist. I didn't feel like I had won anything. I just wasn't constantly losing pieces of myself anymore. Brooke stayed quiet for a while after that coffee. No dramatic reappearances, no guilt-laced texts, no sudden calls begging for help. Honestly, that silence felt like the kindest thing she'd ever given me. She messaged me once, maybe 6 weeks later. Just said, "Got a job. Warehouse gig. Not glamorous, but steady. Thanks for making me look in the mirror," I replied. "Proud of you. Keep going." And that was it. No backslide, no drama. Just progress. My parents, well, they took a little longer to process the shift. They sent a few more emails. Mostly emotional detours dressed up as concern. Family should forgive. "We're worried about the distance between us. We don't want to lose our son." I read every word, then deleted them. Not because I was angry, but because I had nothing left to explain. They had spent years treating my boundaries like suggestions. Years assuming I'd bend, because I always had. They didn't know how to deal with a version of me that said no and meant it. So I stayed quiet. Eventually, they stopped trying to guilt me. I think they realized the old scripts didn't work anymore. It's funny, you spend most of your life thinking love means being available, being helpful, being the person who always shows up, no matter how tired you are. But the truth, sometimes love means stepping back, drawing a line, saying, "This is where I end, that's where you begin." And I can't carry both. It's not anger, it's not punishment, it's just honesty. One Sunday, maybe 4 months after the whole move in mess, I got a letter, an actual handwritten letter. It was from my mum. The handwriting was familiar rounded, a little shaky, full of loops and underlines. Inside was 2 pages of raw truth I hadn't expected. She didn't apologize exactly, but she explained how she grew up in a house where people avoided conflict by burying it, how she was terrified of watching Brooke fall apart, so she clung to the only child who seemed safe. How she thought she was protecting everyone by keeping peace, even if it meant piling everything on me. She ended it with, "I don't know if I deserve a relationship with you anymore, but if you ever want to talk, I'll be here. I'll wait. I'm sorry I made you carry the weight alone." That one made me pause. I didn't respond right away, but I didn't throw it out either. I kept showing up for myself instead. I cooked more, spent real time with friends, started hiking again, got into photography, the kind where you don't post every picture. Just take them to remember the moment happened. I found a rhythm to life that wasn't reactive. No more panicked calls from Brooke asking for a rent extension. No more emails from Dad with passive-aggressive comments hidden between lines like, "Just checking in." No more heavy silence after family dinners where I knew I was being judged for not doing more. Now, I sit on my balcony with coffee and just be. Sometimes I think about that family dinner, how my parents just told me what would happen, how Brooke looked at me like it was already done, how they all assumed I'd fall in line because I always had. That version of me? He doesn't live here anymore. He left with the old apartment. And Brooke? She's still figuring it out. Last I heard, she was working a full-time job. Not glamorous, but she's paying rent. No more couch hopping, no more vague plans. She even started taking classes online. She texted me on my birthday. Nothing dramatic, just happy birthday. "Hope your world's a little lighter now," I smiled when I saw it. Because yeah, it is. The last thing I'll say is this: sometimes revenge doesn't have to be fire and fury. It doesn't have to be a public takedown or a viral call-out. Sometimes it's just walking away with your dignity intact. Sometimes it's not slamming a door, it's locking it quietly. Sometimes the best I told you so is silence. Not everyone will understand your boundaries. Some will call it cold, others will label it selfish. But if those same people demanded warmth from you while burning you out, they were never looking for love, just convenience. And when you stop being convenient, the masks start to fall. So if you're reading this and you're the reliable one in your family, the fixer, the emotional ATM, the peacekeeper, let me say something clearly: you don't owe anyone your exhaustion. You don't have to prove you're worthy by being needed. You are enough even when you say no, even when you walk away, especially then. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll sit across from my parents again. Maybe there'll be real apologies. Maybe we'll rebuild something better. Or maybe not. But whatever happens, I won't be carrying the weight alone. Not anymore. And honestly, that's more than enough. Jordan Story 3. You'd think after someone dies, a family would pull together, mourn, support each other, maybe even eat too much casserole and share stories around the kitchen table. Not my family. When my grandma Hazel passed, everything cracked wide open. She was 83, the quiet backbone of our messy Ohio family. Never loud, never flashy, but sharp, kind, and the kind of woman who sent handwritten thank you notes even after hip surgery. Hazel had this gold bracelet delicate, with tiny leaves carved into the band. It had been passed down through 5 generations of women in our family. And a week before she died, she told me, clear as day, "Annie, I want you to have it. It's yours. Not a suggestion, not a maybe. A gift, a wish. But death has a way of making people show their teeth. After the funeral, we all gathered at my mum's house. Everyone was jittery, distracted, half grieving, half watching the clock for when the stuff would be dealt with. It wasn't even subtle. That's when my older sister, Tessa, made her move. She strutted right over to the table where Grandma's jewellery box sat like some kind of prize display. Without a word, she popped it open, fished out the bracelet, and slipped it onto her wrist. "I'll just take this," she said, all smug and sugar-coated. "You can cry later, like it was a joke, like it was hers to take. And my mum?" She chuckled. "Don't be so dramatic, Annie." No one else said a word. The room just sank. My ears rang, my chest was tight, but I had something they didn't know about. See, the week before Grandma passed, I visited her in the hospital. We sat quietly, hands clasped. Before I left, she asked me to record a message for my cousin in Oregon, but after that, she made me keep the phone rolling. Her voice was soft but steady. "Sweetheart," she said, "I want you to have my bracelet. It belongs with someone who remembers what it's for. Keep it safe, okay?" So I pulled out my phone, right there in that living room full of fake sympathy and polite theft, and hit play. Tessa's face drained like she'd seen a ghost. She yanked the bracelet off like it was burning her and dropped it back in the box. Mum looked anywhere but at me. I picked it up, my fingers shaking, and walked out without another word. I cried the whole drive home. That should have been the end. It wasn't. A week passed. Tessa stopped talking to me. Fine. Not new. What I didn't expect was the group chat turning into a ghost town. Texts left on read, family dinners happening without me. Suddenly, I was radioactive. And then I got a call from Aunt Jeanine, Grandma Hazel's younger sister, who lives down in Sarasota. She hadn't made it to the funeral because she'd fractured her pelvis, but she wasn't calling to chit-chat. "Did you get the box?" she asked. "What box?" Her voice went tight. "A small wooden chest, dark oak, carved sides. Hazel made sure it was meant for you. It's important. She left letters, instructions. You need to see it." I hadn't heard a word about any box. That night, I showed up at Mom's place with some of Grandma's cookbooks. I said I was returning. I casually asked about it. "Wooden box? Grandma's old letters?" She blinked like I'd just spoken in French. "No idea what you're talking about, but I saw the twitch in her eye when I said letters. That was all I needed." The next day, when I knew they'd be out at church, I let myself in with the old key I still had. That house raised me. I knew where the secrets were buried. Top shelf of the hallway linen closet, behind the ratty winter comforters Mom never threw out. There it was, just like Aunt Jeanine said. Dark oak, ivy carvings, small broken lock. Inside, a stack of letters, yellowed photos, receipts, even old property deeds. And one thing that made my heart stop. A typed letter, signed by Grandma, dated just 3 weeks before she passed. Not a will, a confession. She wrote about Tessa. How she'd taken money from her purse years ago. A gold ring that disappeared in 2012. How she never confronted her because she didn't want to break the family. But she wrote this for me. That bracelet? It wasn't just jewellery. It was her way of saying, "I see you. I trust you." She wrote, "Don't let them turn you into the villain. Speak the truth before it's erased." I sat on the floor for almost an hour, just holding the letter. Then I made copies. 3 days later, I confronted Tessa, just the two of us in her kitchen. She didn't deny a thing. She actually smiled. "You think that letter matters? It's not in the will. No one cares about some dying lady's guilt trip." That hit like a slap, not because of the words, but the way she said dying lady like Hazel meant nothing. I had my phone in my pocket. I recorded the whole thing. Later that night, I dropped it in the family group chat. Cue the chaos. Some stayed silent. A few texted me privately. Maybe that wasn't the right way to handle it. But Aunt Jeanine, she called. So did Uncle Rob. And then the floodgates opened. Turns out, the bracelet wasn't the only thing that had gone missing. Grandma's neighbour said Tessa came by the week she went into hospice, asking if Hazel had promised her anything. Another woman from church said Tessa tried to sell an antique clock. Photos vanished. A whole china set gone. And then came the biggest twist yet. A man named Don called me, said he used to do odd jobs for Grandma, fixing gutters, painting her porch, stuff like that. He told me about a time, 2 weeks before Hazel passed, when Tessa showed up with a man he didn't recognise, told Don he could head out early. But as he walked by the kitchen window, he saw her handing that man a stack of envelopes and a small ivory box exact match for the one Hazel kept locked in her closet. I asked if he'd be willing to write a statement. He said yes. That was the moment I realised Tessa hadn't just stolen things, she'd tried to steal Hazel's whole story. I needed help, so I booked a consult with a local attorney, just to ask, what do I even do with this? I showed him the voicemail, the letter, the group chat receipts, Don's statement. He sat back, quiet, then said something I wasn't ready for. Did you know your grandmother had an earlier will? 5 years older. In that version, she left the bracelet, a locket, and a savings account to me. Tessa wasn't even named, just lumped in as other grandchildren. But that will never got filed. It was replaced 3 months before Hazel died. Guess who drove her to that appointment? Guess who picked up the documents? Tessa. The lawyer remembered her. Pushy, he said. Asked weird questions about contesting wills. Wanted extra copies. I left that office with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Tessa hadn't just taken a bracelet. She tried to rewrite Hazel's legacy. And she almost got away with it. Almost. I didn't act right away. There was a time when I would have marched into the middle of everything and burned bridges like I was doing the world a favour. But Hazel, she raised me better than that. So I waited. I started gathering. I backed up the voicemail to 3 drives, saved screenshots, printed the letter, the group chat meltdown, Don's statement. I called Aunt Jeanine almost every night. She kept saying the same thing. Patience is louder than rage. It didn't feel like it at first. Then, 3 weeks later, my mum hosted Tessa's birthday dinner. Low-key, family only. I wasn't going to go. My name wasn't even on the first invite. My cousin forwarded it to me like, "Are you going?" But something in me clicked. I said yes. I showed up with 2 things in my bag, a little USB drive and the wooden box. Tessa smiled when I walked in. That fake, pageant, princess kind of smile she's been doing since high school. Mom hugged me like nothing had happened. I played along. Dinner was awkward. That kind of strained small talk where everyone's pretending this isn't the most dysfunctional meal in town. Then came dessert. Candles, singing, applause. And I stood up. "Before we eat cake," I said, "there's something I want to show you all. It's from Grandma Hazel." The room froze. Tessa's fork stopped mid-air. Mum looked like she was about to say something, but I was already walking to the TV plugged in the USB hit play. There she was, Hazel, tired but clear, filmed the day before she passed. She looked into the camera and said softly, "If you're watching this, it means something didn't go right. I want Annie to have my bracelet, and I want the truth to be known." Tessa is not to take anything I didn't hand her myself. She doesn't understand legacy, only control. You could have heard a pin drop. Tessa stood up like she could somehow pause the moment with her body alone. But it was too late. Hazel had spoken. No paperwork could erase it now. When the video ended, I pulled out the letter, walked over and handed it to Aunt Jeanine. Didn't say a word. She read it aloud. Nobody interrupted. Tessa's face went red, but she didn't cry. She didn't defend herself either. She just grabbed her purse and left. Like she was walking away from smoke, she'd set herself. No one followed her. Later that night, I found my mum still sitting at the table. Everyone else had left. Just her and an untouched piece of cake. I stood next to her for a while. Didn't say anything. Then I said, "You knew." She didn't argue, just looked down and said, "I didn't think it would go this far." But it had. It had gone exactly that far. And it kept going. 2 weeks later, someone spotted Hazel's antique vase on Facebook Marketplace, listed under a burner name, but with Tessa's phone number. The buyer happened to be a friend of Hazel's from church. They called the cops. Turns out, it wasn't just one vase. Tessa had been clearing out Grandma's house like it was her personal thrift store. Old coins, silverware, even account withdrawals traced back to before Hazel died, all under Tessa's name. Some forged documents, some manipulated signatures. She was arrested. Mum tried to distance herself, claimed she didn't know the full story, but people remembered the laugh. They remembered her saying, "Don't be so dramatic, like my grief was just noise." My relationship with her hasn't really recovered. I don't know if it ever will, but I sleep better. I kept the bracelet. It's in a glass box now, with a photo of Hazel from her younger days smiling, wind in her hair, not yet carrying the weight of everyone else's mistakes. And me? I kept everything. The video, the letters, the statements, not to destroy Tessa, but to protect Hazel. Because here's the truth, I let things slide for too long. Let Tessa bulldoze me for years. Let my mum tell me to be quiet, to keep the peace. But peace built on lies? That's not peace, that's surrender. Hazel knew that. She didn't leave me the bracelet for show. She left it as a message, a test, to see who would protect her when she wasn't here to protect herself. And I did. I visit her grave now, not to cry, but to talk. I tell her what happened. I tell her I didn't back down, that her voice was heard, that the truth came out, even if it came late. Some people say family's everything. Maybe that's true, but only if family means loyalty, not silence. Truth, not cover-ups. Hazel was family. The rest? Well, they made their choices. I made mine. And for the first time in a long time, I don't regret it. Not even a little.